In the freezing forests of the Ardennes, 1944. Two patrols stumble into each other in the mist. At this range, less than 20 yards, rifles are useless. The bolt action is a death sentence. This is the domain of the submachine gun. On one side, the German MP40, the Burp Gun, a stamped metal marvel of engineering efficiency that redefined how weapons were mass-produced. It was light, controllable, and the symbol of the Blitzkrieg. On the other side, the American Thompson, the Chicago typewriter, a weapon born in the trenches of World War I and raised in the gangland streets of the Prohibition. It was heavy, horrendously expensive, and fired a bullet that hit like a freight train. History often compares them as equals. They were not. One was a relic of a bygone era of craftsmanship. The other was the blueprint for the modern age. Today, we are going deep into the mechanics, the ballistics, and the economics to answer the ultimate question. If you had to kick down a door in 1944, which one would you trust with your life? To understand the Thompson, you have to understand the trauma of World War I. General John T. Thompson envisioned a trench broom, a weapon designed for one specific purpose: to sweep enemy trenches of life. He wanted a handheld machine gun. The result was a masterpiece of old-world manufacturing. The original model 1921 and 1928 were built like Swiss watches. They were milled from solid blocks of steel. They featured the complex Blish lock mechanism, a friction-delayed blowback system that, in hindsight, was over-engineered and largely unnecessary. They had finned barrels and walnut furniture. But the war ended before the trench broom could sweep. So, it found a new home with bootleggers and G-men. By 1939, the Thompson was an icon, but it was also a dinosaur. It cost the U.S. government $209 per unit. Adjusted for inflation, that is nearly $4,500 per gun. Enter the Germans. In 1938, as the Wehrmacht prepared to conquer Europe, they didn't care about craftsmanship. They cared about volume. Heinrich Vollmer designed the MP38, which evolved into the MP40. This weapon was a revolution. It was the first submachine gun designed entirely for mass production. It used stamped sheet metal parts and bakelite plastic instead of wood. It ditched complex locking mechanisms for a simple, straight blowback operation. While the Americans were paying $209 for a Thompson, the Germans were building MP40's for roughly $24. The Germans realized early what the Americans would learn later. In a total war, good enough and cheap beats perfect and expensive. When the U.S. entered World War II, they panicked. They needed millions of guns, and they couldn't afford $200 apiece. So, the Ordnance Department took a hacksaw to the Thompson. They created the M1 and then the M1A1. They removed the Blish lock. They moved the charging handle to the side. They eliminated the ability to take the iconic drum magazines, which were heavy and rattled anyway, and stuck to 20 and 30-round stick magazines. They welded the sights. By 1944, they got the cost down to $45, but they couldn't fix the weight. The M1A1 Thompson, loaded, weighed nearly 11 pounds. Let's put that in perspective. The M1 Garand battle rifle, which fired a full-power .30-06 cartridge, weighed 9.5 pounds. The Thompson was a brick. The MP40, by comparison, weighed just under 9 pounds. Over a 10-mile march, those 2 pounds feel like 20. Ergonomics is where the MP40 truly shined. It featured a folding metal stock, the first standard-issue SMG to do so. This made it perfect for paratroopers, Fallschirmjäger, and mechanized infantry, Panzer Grenadiers, climbing in and out of half-tracks. The MP40 was front-heavy, but in a good way. The long receiver and the muzzle nut kept the barrel down. Combined with a slow rate of fire, 500 rounds per minute, it was incredibly controllable. A trained soldier could fire the MP40 with one hand if necessary. It chugged like a tractor. The Thompson, conversely, was an ergonomic nightmare. The drop in the stock was designed for firing from the hip, not the shoulder. When you raised it to aim, you had to hunch over it awkwardly. And the rate of fire? The M1A1 ripped at 700+ rounds per minute. Combined with the heavy bolts slamming back and forth, the Thompson wanted to climb. If you didn't lean into it aggressively, your third shot was hitting the clouds. However, there is a paradox here. The sheer weight of the Thompson, that 11-pound bulk, actually helped absorb the recoil of the massive .45 caliber round. It was heavy to carry, but smooth to shoot, if you were strong enough to hold it. If the MP40 was the future, why didn't it win? Because of one critical, fatal engineering mistake: the magazine. The MP40 used a double-stack, single-feed design. This means the bullets sit side by side in the magazine, but must merge into a single line at the top to enter the gun. This creates immense friction. If dirt, mud, or sand got into that tapered neck, the gun jammed. Furthermore, the magazine was long and acted as a lever. In the heat of battle, soldiers naturally wanted to grab the magazine to stabilize the gun, but doing so torqued the feed lips, causing misfeeds. The MP40 was a great gun let down by a terrible magazine. The Thompson, for all its antiquated faults, got this right. It used a double-stack, double-feed system. The rounds didn't merge. They fed straight into the chamber from the left and right. It was essentially frictionless. You could drop a Thompson magazine in the mud, wipe it on your pants, and it would run. It was a crude, heavy mechanism, but in the filth of war, reliability is the only metric that matters. Finally, we must discuss the payload. The MP40 fired the 9x19mm Parabellum, a 115 to 124 grain bullet moving at roughly 1,200 feet per minute. It was fast, flat-shooting, and penetrated well. The Thompson fired the American 45 ACP, a fat, slow, 230 grain bowling ball moving at a subsonic 920 feet per second. American doctrine was obsessed with stopping power, dating back to the Philippine insurrection, where smaller revolvers failed to stop drugged warriors. The 45 ACP didn't penetrate like the 9mm. It crushed. It transferred massive kinetic energy into the target. If you hit an enemy soldier in the arm with a 9mm, he might keep shooting. If you hit him in the arm with a 45 at close range, you were likely taking the arm off, or at least spinning him around. The Thompson was not a precision instrument. It was a bludgeon. This is why the troops called it the trench broom. In an urban environment, clearing a room in Carentan or a bunker in Okinawa, you didn't need the MP40's range. You needed the Thompson's brute force. So, which was the better weapon? From an engineering and logistical standpoint, the MP40 wins, hands down. It was lighter, cheaper, and pioneered the manufacturing techniques that gave us the AK-47 and the M16. It was the better submachine gun for arming an army of millions. But the Thompson was a survivor. It was too heavy, too expensive, and ergonomically archaic. Yet, when the mud clogged the actions and the chips were down, the American G.I. reached for the Thompson because they knew it would fire. The MP40 was a triumph of the mind, a logical industrial solution. The Thompson was a triumph of the will, a heavy, hateful piece of steel that simply refused to quit. But the real winner? It was neither. By 1944, the U.S. introduced the M3 grease gun, a stamped metal gun that cost just $15. It was ugly, but it proved that the Germans were right all along. Stamped steel was the future. The Thompson was the last gladiator of the old world. Which one would you choose to carry on D-Day? The precision German MP40 or the heavy-hitting Chicago typewriter? Tell us in the comments.